Madam Chancellor, distinguished guests, fellow graduates, families and friends, and David Naylor for that extraordinarily generous citation, thank you. The degree that I have just received is a rare honor, both humbling and heartening. And so is graduating with you, the 2019 Science and Commerce classes from New College, who worked so hard for this day. Congratulations to you all, and thank you for including me in your celebrations. I am much favored by good fortune and good friends and a very special university. Before I continue, I'd like to welcome my family here this afternoon and dear friends, both in front of me, in the audience, and in the seats behind me. Without them, I would not be here today. Just as I am pretty sure you would not be here were it not for the support and encouragement you received over the years from your families and friends and supporters gathered in Convocation Hall this afternoon. And I know you share my gratitude to them all. I spent much of my career at New College, and I want to take a minute to celebrate your college, our college. It took its name and some of its inspiration from New College, Oxford, founded in 1379, a connection represented by the medieval stone angel that was recovered from its original 14th century quadrangle, given to our college on its founding almost 600 years later in 1962, and set into the wall of Wetmore Hall Lounge. But instead of trying to replicate the character of that venerable college and its quadrangle, New College Toronto did something different, building a courtyard with graceful curves instead of squared-off quadrangle corners. And with that simple, at the time radical architectural gesture, it helped transform the University of Toronto in the 1960s as surely as the curves of the City Hall and the Henry Moore sculpture in Nathan Phillips Square transformed the city, reconciling the grid lines of our streets with the curves of our rivers and ravines and communities and cultures, nourishing new ways of looking at things and thinking about ourselves, and fostering innovative interdisciplinary programs and unprecedented diversity among our students. I remember one class I taught with 48 students in which there were 32 different languages spoken. That's your college and your university. It is exactly 50 years ago since I graduated from the University of Toronto, and like many of you this afternoon, I was full of wonder that the day had finally arrived, and anxiously wondering what I was going to do next. Wonder and wondering are two sides of the same coin, and although they are sometimes exhausting and unnerving, they help us find our way in the world. So be comforted if you're not sure about what lies ahead. Navigating the future is not unlike finding your way sailing on the sea, especially before satellite GPS, when you had to take stock of your position on the curve of the earth by charting your position in lines on a map. And to do this when everything was moving: the boat, the wind, the waves, the current, the stars. Just like it is when you conduct an experiment, or study the environment, or run a business, or live your life. When I began sailing on the West Coast, the best nautical charts of the Pacific were filled with small islands and rock outcrops marked PD and ED. The first meant position doubtful, and the second, existence doubtful. This was the 1960s, I should emphasize, not the 1690s, and it wasn't encouraging. But it did keep us watching and wondering, and in that way it kept us safe, navigating on the assumption that we didn't know everything. Uncertainty sharpens the mind even as it encourages the imagination, and the degree you will be receiving shortly is in a very real sense a covenant in wonder with the world and in wondering about it. I took my first degree at the University of British Columbia in mathematics, and I came to the serious study of literature when I realized that it was the storytelling in mathematics and the sciences that fascinated me, the ways in which they use symbolic languages and esoteric classifications to tell wonderfully mysterious stories. Later, when I had the privilege of teaching at the university, I decided that despite all the different names we give to our disciplines, what we all do here is tell stories in laboratories and lecture halls and scholarly books and serious reasonings over coffee. You may think that your various disciplines are widely different one from another. The skills they require may be, but their ideas are in fact surprisingly similar. Most of them have to do with reconciling relationships between mass and energy, or nurture and nature, or family expenditures and the gross national product, or the life cycle of fish and the disposal of waste, or the actions of men and women and the history of a nation. Putting one thing in the context of something else, reconciling two stories, as it were, and seeking to understand each according to the other. Another reconciliation of our relationships with indigenous people, which almost certainly includes some of you, is much on all our minds these days, and I want to finish with a word or two about it. The wretched and for many ruinous legacy of residential schools has brought this to the fore, and many individuals and communities, including this university, are involved in admirable initiatives to transform relationships corrupted by centuries of broken treaty promises, and to honor the extraordinary courage and celebrate the inspiring pride of those who have endured generations of marginalization. But I want to leave you with a particular challenge. For while the damaged lives and deadly conditions and debilitating lack of opportunity still experienced by many indigenous people today is a national disgrace, and while for far too long many of us have been shamefully oblivious to the dislocation and dispossession we have caused, it's ultimately a conflict between stories, one held dear by Indigenous people in Canada and one cherished by the rest of us that ultimately needs to be reconciled. Let me explain. The Chancellor began this convocation with rightful acknowledgement on our behalf of the traditional Indigenous lands upon which this lovely celebration takes place. At the end of the ceremony, we'll sing our national anthem together. And the challenge facing us is in its opening words. O Canada, our home and native land. Indigenous people across the country would wish us to sing our home on native land. They believe that this land is the home that has been chosen for them by their Creator or by ancestors stretching back for many First Nations over 10,000 years. While for those of us whose families have come here from yesteryear to yesterday, it's the home we have chosen and made for ourselves with hard work and dedicated struggle. We need to respect both stories, for they give each of us a sense of who we are and why we're here. And we are all here to stay. Reconciling them is the unfinished business at the heart of this country. It will not be easy. Simply telling a curve to straighten up or a line to loosen up never works. And it may always be a work in progress, like science and commerce and this country of ours. And it needs all of us. For these stories are not just about the place we call home, but about our collective stewardship of its material and spiritual resources, of our environment in the broadest and deepest sense. The Viennese call a person who looks after a house on behalf of others a Hausbesorger, a house worrier. We are the house warriors of our shared home, custodians of an environment for which we and the Indigenous people we live with are responsible, and we need to reconcile our sense of responsible house worrying with theirs. That's where you come in. As I suggested a moment ago, reconciling complex relationships has been at the center of your university education. So bring your unique perspectives, shaped by your studies here and your individual communities, to bear on this issue. As you do that, always be ready to be corrected by someone with a quite different perspective and a different way of thinking about things, ready to be surprised by positions doubtful. With that in mind, I think of a story told by John Lubbock, a distinguished 19th century scientist cited by Charles Darwin in The Origin of Species, who for all his noble heritage, he started his life as Sir John Lubbock and ended as Lord Avebury, he had a counterculture instinct and loved when conventional wisdom, even science itself, was for a moment turned upside down or inside out. And he would often tell a tale against himself about a conversation he had with an old farmer standing next to a pile of stones in a country field. "Do you know how these stones were made?" The scientist asked him. "Why, sir, I expect they growed, same as taters," answered the man. "Well," rejoined Lubbock, drawing on his lifetime's association with the greatest geologists and naturalists of the time, and a lecture at the ready for the foolish farmer, "but if they lay there for 50 years, they would not get any bigger." "No, sir, of course they wouldn't," replied the farmer. "Same as potatoes. Take potatoes out of the ground, and they stops growing." Back to this wonderful day of celebration. You should be very proud of what you have accomplished here, earned through your challenging programs of courses and credits, and culminating in graduation from one of the world's greatest universities. The word credit, like the word credential, comes from the Latin word credo, which means "I believe." And this convocation announces that the University of Toronto believes in you. We ask you, in return, to believe in yourself. You have good reason to, and we need you to. Congratulations, and thank you.